Hi, my name's William Schaeffer with a bizarre story about Boogie Woogie Piano. And it goes all the way back to the beginning of my life. My father was a musician, and to me, as I was growing up, he was the best musician in the world. He was the finest musician I had ever heard. Now, we personally didn't really get along, and that's a whole nother story. Now, I never, there's a lot of piano stories I'm being reminded of all of a sudden. When I had started playing piano and I was in the seventh grade, I heard my brother, my little brother, playing Maple Leaf Rag perfectly by ear. I knew I could never do that, so I had to learn composing music on piano. This is the truth. I was in seventh grade. So I worked on a little song and asked my father for help with the melody. It was extraordinarily primitive, but he showed me a melody line that was in fact the Boogie Woogie bass line. And then he showed me the basic Boogie Woogie left hand pattern. Now we have to go back in time. But before we do, my entire playing style, my entire conception of music on the piano is based on three things. How my father taught me to improvise, the boogie woogie that my father taught me on piano, the bass line specifically, and three, when I later learned, the 12-bar blues. These are the three fundamental elements of my development as a musician. So my father showed me the boogie woogie bass line. Now, let's go back in time. My father had a friend in grade school who will be called Ray. Now, Ray came from a pretty middle-class family, whereas my father's family was poor. My dad's father was unemployed during the Depression. And in fifth or sixth grade, Ray started piano lessons. And they were friends, and my father sorely wanted to play music. He begged his mother and father for an accordion, and they refused to help him out. They refused to give him music lessons because they had no money, and that's the kind of people they were. His older brother, who was in the military at the time and had a little money, relented and bought my father an accordion. So while his friend Ray took music lessons, my father taught himself music on the accordion. He had a fantastic ear, and as a young boy of 4, he amazed friends and family with his singing. But when I knew him, when I was a young boy of 4 and he was my father, he was an accordion player. I have a fond memory of when I'm about 2, playing an acoustic guitar like it is a stand-up bass to try and accompany my father playing accordion. And I believe that my brother Scott is in possession of a slide that records that event. But that's another story. Now back to our main narrative. In the 1930s and in the 1940s especially, Boogie Woogie became very popular. And during the war, it was extraordinarily popular. There was a freeze on recording for technical reasons, political reasons, and there were no new records made for a while in 42 and 43. So Boogie Woogie swept the United States. Ray taught my father a very simple Boogie Woogie pattern. Apparently Ray shared a lot of his music education with my father, And they were later in a band together, and my father later paid his way through college by playing music. But he never really learned to read music. He never had music lessons, and he never had the opportunity because his parents did not help him out. Now, when I was in 5th grade, it was very important for me to have music lessons, and I did not know why. I did not have a particular inclination toward music. But that's an entirely different story. I'll tell you about the piano and the hammer sometime. And as I said, later on in 7th grade, I dutifully learned to play piano for 3 years, and I worked really hard at it because I really wanted to be a good boy and do the right thing, as hard as that is to believe. And in 7th grade, my father showed me the Boogie Woogie bass line, and for a couple years I practiced it, so by the time I was in high school, I could play the Boogie Woogie bass line, the alternating bass line, with chords and simple improvisation in the right hand and not make any mistakes, not lose the rhythm. And as I said, this boogie woogie bass line attitude really became the basis for my musical style, along with the blues and just the other things I learned. Now we fast forward to 1988, and my father is dying. And I invite him out to Los Angeles. And as a surprise, when we're going to dinner, I have 2 of his friends that live in Los Angeles show up. And one of those 2 friends is Ray. So Ray shows up with his wife, and there's, some other people from my father's high school who I don't really know. And we had a really fun time. And that was the only time in my life I have ever met Ray. About a year after that, my father died. And a few years after that, Ray sent me and my brothers an email saying, "I constantly see your father in my dreams." And I sent him an email response to the group saying, "Well, tell him I said hi. Because if you see him in your dreams, tell him I said hi." And I didn't hear anything from Ray after that. Around 1996, it hit me that Ray is responsible for my entire playing style. That he taught my father the boogie woogie bass line that my father taught me, that I have based my entire playing style on. And I've never heard Ray play piano ever. So I invite him to dinner. I call him up and say, "Look, I'll buy you dinner. We'll go wherever you want, the most expensive place, and I'll buy you dinner, and I'd love to hear you play piano, because I've never heard you play piano." Well, for some reason, Ray was not interested. And I do not fully understand this. And it has something to do with the fact that my father and I did not have a good relationship when he died. In my opinion, he was way too abusive toward me, and I was too young to see it in any kind of perspective. We all have our shortcomings, but my father was the greatest piano player on earth and the best musician that ever lived. And he will always be my shining star as a piano player. And my brother Brian was the best natural musician that ever lived, and he never did anything with it. And I'm really just an actor. I act like a piano player, and most of the time I get away with it. So Ray refused to have dinner with me. He refused to see me under any circumstances. We wouldn't even meet somewhere. He wouldn't even accept money to have me pay him to play piano for me. That was it. And a few years later, it became very obvious he was not even answering my phone calls. That was it. It was over. And I've lived in Los Angeles, and Ray, my father's friend, is now about 90 some years old. And the entire 30 years I've lived here, he's lived here. And I've only seen him once, He refuses to talk to me, and I have no reason why. And the irony is, he's a successful musician, or he was. And he is entirely responsible for my boogie woogie piano playing style. And I have never, ever heard him play piano. And I have only met him once in my life. And my father, who was the finest musician I ever knew, has been dead 30 years now, almost. And life goes on. So that's a funny, ironic story. And who would know? But I love playing the boogie woogie, and I love playing piano, and I love music. And I guess by extension, I must love life. Thanks, have a great day, and leave your comments below.